Yes. It's the phrase that pays. Cocaine. Yo, what just happened? What just the weather outside may be frightful, but inside your video scope with your three expert cartoonists, it's so delightful. Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. When you see these three smiling angelic countenances, 1, 2, 3, count them. It means a couple of things must be true. One, it must be Wednesday, 8 p.m. EST somewhere in the world. Two, I don't know what two is. Oh, you're about to be ensorcelled by our matinee idol good looks and lantern jaws. And three, it must be pinch me, I must be dreaming time. How do I come up with this stuff off the top of my head? Guys, let's do some introductions for our show. I am your first co-host. My name is Jamar Nicholas. Besides this very nice hat I have, I wear many others. I am the second vice president of the National Cartoonist Society. Rubin submissions are open. If you are interested, cartoonist, in submitting to the Rubens Divisional Awards, and categories are open now. Go to nationalcartoonist.com, you guys, and enter. You do not have to be a member of the NCS to submit. Oh, okay. Also, I am the chapter chair of Philadelphia. So I think we got a lot of Pennsylvania going on today. So I'll save some of that for later. Also, you may be interested to know that I am a graphic novelist. I have a middle grade graphic novel chapter book series at Scholastic. Leon the Extraordinary is the name of the series. Are you ready for the new title? Did I tell you? Leon and the Big Problem is the next book in my series. Will be out November 2026. Steve, what should they do?
If they can, they and I hate to ask them a question like this, but they should cop it. Why don't they?
Why don't they? Thank you so much. I would be remiss if I did not introduce my cohort, co-conquistador, and co-conspirator. He is the reigning, standing, and defending world heavyweight champion of webcomics. You know him by name. By God, it must be Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Gentlemen, so good to see you. I'm still high from last week's episode, but I did take a moment to go to Central Florida Comic Con this weekend and met some penciliers. I see Tio Michael in the chat. Good to see you. But my name is Steve Conley. I am but a junior member of the National Cartoonist Society who still has to submit his comic to the Regional Division Awards.
Yeah, man.
And I make The Middle Age. You can read it over on Webtoons, Tapas, Go Comics, and at middleagecomic.com. And I make the TTRPG stuff, the Dungeons and the Dragons stuff that you love, including Stabracadabra, which if you go to Stabracadabra, you can see the latest one, pre-order it, and all that stuff.
I love it.
But I would be remiss. I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the Man of the Hour, Too Sweet to Be Sour, the Maestro of Mark Making, the Magnificent, the Magnanimous, the Mercurial Mr. Mike Manley.
Hey, yo. What up, Mike Manley?
Hello, everyone. I'm the mercurial one, and I have drawn your mercurial childhoods. In fact, it's funny, I came across some old coloring book stuff I posted on my Blue Sky today that I did in I think around 1985, 86. Visionaries. Does anybody remember that old?
Yo, I love the Visionaries.
I did a couple. I think Marvel had that license, so I did a couple coloring books of the Visionaries back then. I did a whole bunch of stuff like that in the 80s. Because when you didn't have a comic job, you wanted to have another job drawing, so I did all kinds of stuff that I don't think I ever watched the show, but
no, I did. If I get this right, Mike, Visionaries was another kind of like battle lineup show with a bunch of kind of like future knights, and they had holograms on their chest, and they had standards, right, and they could like make shit come out of their chest.
Yeah, I think they're animals. They're holographic animals came out of the standards or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, and then like Merlin was in the show.
Oh, like straight up Merlin.
Yeah, I think like Merlin was like gave the guys their staffs or whatever.
So, Mike, I have a question. When you did this kind of gigs, and maybe the cartoon was new, or they just gave you like a style packet, or maybe they didn't, and they're like, okay, so they're knights with animals on their chest, and you're like, got it. How many pages?
Yeah, because I mean,
connect to the material.
You would get
like whatever.
Yeah, you would get like a model pack. I mean, it's funny because in the beginning of my career, I did a lot of that. My first job for DC was working as an assistant on Robotech Defenders, which was a robot comic based upon the toys from Japan. And so one of the things I did on that was I also bought there was models of those. So I bought the models and built the models to be able to draw the comic. But then because then I drew robots. So then when I went, those are the samples I had when I went to Marvel. And they're like, oh, you draw robots. How about you do Transformers, right? So then my first job at Marvel was drawing the Transformers. Again, a show I didn't really watch that show. I also bought toys. You had some model sheets, but then you ended up having to buy the toys. And then the difference between the model sheet for the cartoon and the actual toy sometimes were like they were very different.
That was like I remember you talking about, and like the early Transformer stuff, and you probably just said a little bit about this, is that the toys, the comics and the toys in the cartoon didn't all line up yet. Like that happened later.
Yeah, like I remember one of the guys had the bird. Was that Starscream that had the
sound wave,
right?
Yeah.
And I remember I still have them somewhere. I came across them like a couple years ago. I still have a box of them. And I remember having to draw them. And, unlike now, where like as soon as something is done, the model sheets are like everywhere, right? And there's art of books and all kinds of stuff. That was not that way in like 1985 or 1986. And then actually even coming across the stuff is like you were basically limited to whatever the licensor sent you.
Yeah.
And if the editor even knew what all the shit was to make sure that you got the stuff. So yeah, it was really and depending upon the licensor, some like Mattel were very picky. Another they didn't give a shit.
So it's like to the wins, every job is different. You just don't know until you get it. Right?
So you were handing your Toys R Us receipts to your accountant?
Yes, actually,
Excellent.
I did. Yes, I did. Yes, that's one of the first things I learned was to save all your receipts for all that stuff, and you give it to your accountant, and then they would have those formulas that say like, well, you can take all this off. That's okay, but if you take this off, that's a red flag.
60% Autobots, 20%.
Right. Yeah. If you didn't draw any Dinobots, you can't take those off.
I love it. That's the new standard for pencil to pencil. Keep the receipts.
I have always told all my students and all my assistants, keep your receipts. It's better to have the receipt and then your accountant says you can throw them away than them to say, well, do you have your receipts for that? And you go like, no. No. Yeah, the sucky part is having to keep them for 7 years.
Oh, right. But that's also I see, and we'll get started in a second. You see all these new little apps these ads for apps all over the social medias about these new things that'll kind of help you itemize your deductions. and they kind of low key lie to people. They're like, hey, you know, you can write that off for your taxes, which makes it sound like it's free, and people wind up getting in trouble like that. It ain't free.
Yeah,
You might-
I've had a professional accountant almost since the beginning. I think almost since the beginning. And the accountant I have now, I know I've had the accountant I have now since the late 90s when I incorporated. So,
well, it's
it costs you money, but it costs you money, but it saves you money. You know, it takes money to make money, as they say.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing you learn on this fine feathered program that we do every Wednesday at 8 p.m. is that it pays to listen to people who know what they're talking about. Case in point. So this will be a great place to get started for tonight. Guys, I'm very excited to bring in our guest. Don Simpson is here. What?
Woo!
I'm very excited. Don is a cornerstone of comics, and we have lots of things to talk about and questions to ask. And I'm going to, as usual, put Mike on the spot to give some flowery text about our guest. So,
Well,
Mike, what you got for us tonight?
Well, it's funny because as we're talking, we realize that we're very similar, just about the same age. We're both from Michigan. And as we were talking before the podcast, you know, our origins are similar in the similar area, yet I don't think as when we were younger, our paths ever crossed, which really goes to show you how different, even though the business was smaller, before there was an internet, you could be like, oh, I heard of that guy, but you might not ever meet that guy.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think Don was one of those guys, as was Mitch O'Connell, who I think was friends with Don. And I knew of Mitch through the comic book store that I went to in Ann Arbor, the Eye of Agamotto. So, but yeah, I mean, Don's been in the business basically from right around the same time. You know, he's done Megaton Man and Bizarre Heroes. He even had he even has a pseudonym, Anton Dreck, because he did the Naughty comics for Fantagraphics. I mean, Don's been around the block and back a few times. So and he's part of the Michigan or Detroit Mafia. There's so many people in comics from Detroit.
Not the militia. They're talking about the comics.
No, not the militia. Those guys are really bad with anatomy. I mean, look at them, you know. But and Don was really an early pioneer of like self-publishing. And he really worked the circuit in the early days.
I love it. Well, we've spent enough time talking to each other. Let's talk to Don Simpson. So, guys, welcome to Pencil, Don Simpson. Ting! You've been rendered. Hello.
You're making me sound like a big deal or something, or a historical artifact. One of the things you have to explain to people today. Am I muted?
No, I hear him.
I can hear him, Mike.
Oh, you can? Yeah.
Hello, bang, bang, bang.
No, go ahead. Yeah, you're good, Don.
One of the things you have to explain to the younger generation in comics today, and I don't even know what comics is today, but there are presumably these younger people that are claiming.
I don't hear Don on my end for some reason.
But you have to explain to people that like how politicized it was, not political in a politics sense, but politicized. Like if you were in the independent ranks, then you didn't hang out with the Marvel people. Well, Marvel didn't hang out with anybody. You go to these conventions and like it would be very tribal, and like there'd be this gathering of the tribes, but then all the tribes would just be like, you know, keep to themselves, and except for DC. DC reached out and they raided quite a few people. We just lost Mike.
He'll return.
See what I'm talking about? They're so snooty. They're so cliquish that they keep to themselves. But so that might be why we might not have crossed paths. Hello, I'm switching around. There you are.
There you go. Sorry about that. We had to get.
Mike, I was explaining how cliquish some of these pros were, and then you disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he's having some audio. I think he's having some audio issues.
I definitely my Mike is grabbing his Eros comics.
Well, we'll get it sorted out.
But I definitely remember the Eye of Agamotto, and I don't know about a mafia. There were quite a few people from Detroit. We were kind of unified by wanting to get out of Detroit and get into comics and be somewhere else. I've lived in Pittsburgh now for more than half my life. Where are you guys at? Where's Steve at?
I'm in Florida. I was in Washington D.C. for 20 years, and I moved down here about 10 years ago.
Okay, and you went to you were part of the Spirits of Independence tour. Did you table? Were you like?
Oh yeah. Okay. I had a pretty terrible comic, and I went to quite a few of the stops on the tour. That was my first. That's where I met like most of the folks who like Bat and Lash and Rick Veach and Steve Bissett.
All right. I have to refresh certain brain cells sometimes, but yeah, I knew your name from somewhere.
And I also did some. I probably started with Pittsburgh Comic Con for a few years, but I didn't fit in there either. If there were cliques, I was sitting on my lunch table by myself with my peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
But now, now people can work for all kinds of different publishers, and there's they still use the term independent and mainstream, but I don't know what they mean. I don't know what comics means anymore, but I don't see the borderlines between genres, and all of that doesn't seem as rigid in recent years.
Hey Don, our buddy Tom Zoller, what's up, America's Tom Zoller, says, Steve, you and Don would have met at Mid Ohio. Remember Mid Ohio?
That's quite possible too.
Yeah.
So yeah, the speaking of the Spirits of Independence tour, Billy Tucci, I had the artwork. We did a piece of artwork with Megaton Man and the Hot Rod. I can show you.
Sure.
Let me prep this up first before I ask you to share screens here. But
Steve, can you handle that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry that it was on my iPad and it just it would not work.
Well, can you hear? You can hear now, Mike.
I can hear you and see you now, but yeah, for some reason I could see you, but I couldn't hear you on the iPad. So
okay.
So
my knit cap is lime green. Is that coming across? All right.
No,
you could share your screen with me if you wanted to.
Yeah, at the bottom.
At
the bottom of the desktop, you should see present.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know, the Spirits of Independence tour was 30 years ago. It was like 1995, and it was kind of the brainchild, I think, primarily of Dave Sim. He kind of coordinated it, and there were there's a lot of independent conventions, and the idea was there was a local cartoonist and a local retailer would set up a one-day convention somewhere in the country. And I know there were some in, it was Vermont, Austin, Texas had one, Phoenix, Arizona, maybe it was James Owen. I think Paul Pope was involved in one. I think Don you were, I think you were.
Do you see the graphic?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So this was the graphic I created for Pittsburgh. Yeah, well, the self-publishing movement, so-called, that kind of um, Dave Sim never saw a parade go past his house that he didn't want to jump at the front of, and he took credit for it, but each of us had to kind of do our own legwork. How do I stop sharing? Okay, how's that? But that's the original color file, and I posted it on Facebook. I sent it to Billy Tucci. He wants to run it in his one of his collections coming up. So, but that's 300 DPI, 1995.
Was it computer colored?
State of the art. I was explaining to you before the show started that some of these files have been copied over from Macintosh to Windows, from SideQuest to hard drives to smaller hard drives, and it's amazing that they survive.
Our unofficial sponsor here is Zip Discs, SideQuest Zip drives.
Oh man, I remember this. SideQuest.
I was heavy into those. I had a stack of those little blue ones.
Jazz disc, zip disc. I remember it was a great day when I could throw my SideQuest in the garbage. Those things, the way they used to rattle around like an old 8-track tape,
That's so funny. So real quick, Don. I didn't know about your Michigan connection. I knew you as a Pittsburghian, so that's really cool. Yeah, I'm from Philly, so.
Well, it sounds like Mike and I both graduated high school in 1980. He was up in Huron, wherever that was, Lake. He was probably north of
Ann Arbor.
Oh, Ann Arbor. Oh, okay. Oh, Huron High School. Oh, of course, Huron River. Yeah, the Huron High School in Ann Arbor. I was 25 minutes east in Livonia.
Yep.
Fabled Livonia, Michigan, 6 Mile and Inkster.
Inkster.
Did you ever meet Stanley Mouse? Stanley Mouse had a couple comic book shops. One of them was like a mile from my house at 7 Mile and Inkster. But Stanley Mouse became the Grateful Dead album cover artist and the Journey album cover artist and so forth. I've never met him. He had left town long before. But you were talking about a Michigan mafia. There's so many people that came from Detroit. We were unified by wanting to get out. I think
that's true. That's true. I took the first opportunity to get out. Yep.
So Mike Kazala did it before me. He's an animator. He drew Ren and Stimpy for Marvel, and he worked on The Simpsons when it was on the Tracy Ullman show. Bill Morrison's from Detroit. He actually he was a student at the Center for Creative Studies a couple years ahead of me, and he remembers me. I don't remember him too well. There was a group of people that hung out. I was only there for a year part-time, and then I dropped out. But I knew we were talking about Arvell Jones and Desmond Jones ran a place called Alternative Design. Keith Pollard. There was an artist named James Malone, African American, who did. He used to do editorial cartoons for the Michigan Chronicle, which was like the weekly, the black newspaper in Detroit. And he knew Arvell, and he knew all those people like Al Milgram and Rich Buckler and people like that had already kind of passed through, and they were already further east. Mike Gustovich lived in Michigan for a while. He was maybe the first real pro that I met, but I met a lot of guys through James Malone. I met Keith in high school. He was penciling Spider-Man and Fantastic Four and stuff like that. And I used to hang out. Arvell and Desmond Jones started an outfit called Alternative Design, which was ostensibly a commercial art studio, but they were kind of struggling the whole time. But I used to visit their offices in the early '80s, and Keith would drop by and so forth. So I don't know if it was I don't know if those connections really helped my career in any way. I mostly just mailed stuff out and found Kitchen Sink Press, but certainly a lot of people. Jim Starlin had already left town and so forth. So there was a
You
whole
originally wanted to work for Marvel. Was that your goal, sort of, or?
Yes, until I met Keith. I would see, I was 15, 16. I was in high school. I was, penciling. You have no idea anything about reproduction or what will reproduce and what won't reproduce. Obviously, that carried on with me for quite a while. Because if you look at the detail that I was putting into the early issues of Megaton Man, you just say this is insane. But I got to meet him and I visited him down in Southgate. He was, and he just showed me pencils of different jobs that he did and the variety of inkers that he got. So he would get, he'd get Joe Sinnott on FF, and he'd have Tony DeZuniga on the Hulk magazine, and then he'd have Dave Hunt or somebody like Mike Esposito or somebody just hacking it out like Jim Mooney and his stable of assistants at the last minute, kind of thing. And I just looked at this array of, like, first of all, I'm penciling my guts out and I'm thinking, I'm going to mail this into New York, and then they're going to hand it off to Joe Blow, who comes in off the street. I don't know. I knew myself well enough at age 15, 16. I thought, I'm not going to do that. So I started to learn how to ink myself. And eventually I started, just writing and lettering and doing the whole thing. But up till that point, I was thinking of, I would draw the meddler or, some of my characters that I had in junior high school. I would draw them with the Marvel characters and teaming up and stuff. And I had this fantasy of the Marvel bullpen as this real thing, like there was down the hall would be John Romita and but the closer I got to it and meeting some of these professionals, and it wasn't like they burdened me with their cynicism necessarily. I just picked that up myself. But Keith, the other thing that Keith was important was in telling me about like ownership. Like you create characters and you could own them or you could give them away to Marvel or DC. And because I blithely asked him, do you have any of your own characters, like a villain? Wouldn't you want to put that into a Spider-Man story or something? And he said, sure, I've got a whole closet full of characters, but I'm not giving them away to Marvel. And it was like, what? Like, you're doing, and this is the guy who's doing the job that I thought I wanted, right? Like this is the dream, you're penciling Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, you're doing Thor and so forth. I mean, this is like the guts and glue of the Marvel universe. And what an honor to create a character. And then then he explained to me about Siegel and Schuster and Neil Adams trying to get these guys a pension to live on. And then he mentions Howard the Duck and Steve Gerber and all that whole mess of the lawsuits and so forth. And my eyes were like this big. And then he says, and he mentions Rich Buckler. And I don't think too many people know, but Rich Buckler had this deal with Deathlock. And Keith and Arvell, like Rich was so slow on the book that Keith and Arvell were always helping backgrounds and inking and stuff like that. But apparently, Deathlock, he had brought Deathlock to Marvel, but he retained certain rights that he could have kept if he had commissioned somebody to write a prose paperback or something of that order. And this was explained to me by Keith at the time. I've never heard anybody else talk about it. I met Rich Buckler many years later. Didn't really press him on this point, but I don't know what the deal was. But apparently Buckler got so far behind that he forfeited the rights, whatever rights he had. And but those were the three. Superman, Howard the Duck, and Deathlock the Demolisher were the three counter examples of why you don't want to work for hire and create characters that a corporation will own. Aside from the fact that they will take your pencils and they will give it to somebody who is, using a piece of glass and an ink bottle and trying to make a deadline at the last minute. So those two factors. It was suddenly like I was all set to be a Marvel penciler. I'm a sophomore, junior in high school, and then I'm thinking, I got to learn how to ink at least, and maybe I should keep my own characters to myself, and maybe, and then I was looking around for different models, and there were things. Speaking of Detroit, there was Power Comics in Michigan, if you recall, Mike.
Yeah.
And Mike Gustovich, that's how I met Mike Gustovich. Bill Loebs was doing things. T.K.C. Brennan, those were some of the first. I didn't meet Bill Loebs until after I had finished Megaton Man and I had a contract for Megaton Man. So that would have been 84, in summer of 84. But I met some of these other folks. Do you remember Stu Shapiro? Mike?
The name sounds familiar.
He became Todd Loren, and then he got murdered. He was the publisher of that rock and roll comics, Revolutionary Comics, out in San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
And they think it was the same. They think it was this. Might have been the same murderer of Gianni Versace. Well, I knew Stu. I knew Stu when he was living in Southfield in his parents' basement, and he would run these little Fantasticons. And that's where I met Mike Gustovich, and I met T.K.C. Brennan. And I started doing flyers for him when I was 15, 16. So I was getting my early inking experience. I would get to see some repro. And Stu Shapiro paid me $5 per flyer.
Well, as we were saying, when we were talking before, back before the internet, you would meet. There weren't as many conventions, so you might go to a convention. I met Keith Pollard at a convention in Detroit. I was still in high school, and I got a critique, and then I met Mike Vosberg, who's also from Detroit, Terry Austin, Paul Milgram, Walt Simonson, and there was somebody else, all at a show in Livonia.
Okay.
Right, and I remember Walt gave me a really good critique. Walt gave me a good critique, but it was not so easy to find, like you said, what did original art look like? I remember going to that show and actually seeing, this is an actual page. This is, it was like a Fantastic Four page, which looked like the fucking Mona Lisa or something, like you actually saw an original page. You saw how big it was. It was not so easy, but I do remember as a kid in high school being very aware of, probably from reading things like the Comics Journal, that comics was a business that would not be kind to you in the long run, because there were many people like Jack Kirby or like you're saying Siegel and Schuster, people like that, they got royally screwed, right? And so you could give them your character, but they did you would definitely lose it. The other thing at that era was it was much harder to self-publish, because the way I tried to self-publish early on, and it was not easy. I mean, it's all set up now. Printers are all set up to do it. There's so many things today that you can do that, in like 1980 was nearly impossible to, because you would have to come up with all that money, print all your comics, send them out, hope you got enough money back to not go broke. The system was not set up to serve the small fry back in the day.
Yeah, well, you're, Jamar and Steve are maybe too young to remember the 20th century, but we used to have this stuff called carbon paper. You would have to type. It's a long story, but there was Power Comics, which was run out of Lansing or East Lansing or something.
Yeah,
and then there was 8 Plus, which I think was a Detroit publication. Dave Sim was doing Cerebus up in Toronto. He was printing at Preeny Print and Litho over in Windsor, Ontario, which is right across the bridge. And so it was all around us, but self-publishing per se was not yet a thing in a generally accepted sense. There were ground levels, there were undergrounds and ground levels. But you speak about the Comics Journal, there was like so I went from Keith Pollard about 1976, 77. I would meet him. I became aware of underground comics. Around the same time was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Yep.
And which was ironic because there was this John Buscema book, but Marvel was probably at the lowest point in their quality control of all time, around 1978. Like Keith would do the breakdowns for Spider-Man, and then there would be like 5 other issues of like fill-ins. It was unbelievable. But there was that going on. I picked up, and I blogged about this. There was a book called The Masters of Comic Book Art by P.R. Garriock, which is a British publication. I got that remaindered. I was visiting Pittsburgh, and I picked that up midway through my junior year in high school. So then I was like totally into European Mobius, heavy metal, all that kind of stuff. And then you'd read the Comics Journal, and like every month would be like how, Jan Sternad writing about his brilliant career at Marvel and how he would never work for them again, and David Anthony Kraft, and like every month would be another horror story of what assholes they were at Marvel and so forth. So all of that was going on, and I created Megaton Man in that period. I mentioned Mike had mentioned the Detroit Metro Times. I'd done a couple strips for them and that kind of thing, but I was just kicking around Detroit, wanting to be a comic book artist and not quite knowing how to get there from here. And the world was, there was like Raw Magazine, and there was Weirdo, and there was the Comics Journal, and there was Cerebus and a few other things, but it wasn't at all a clear, the yellow brick road. Like,
no, it really.
I couldn't find the yellow brick road. I was like looking around; it was all overgrown. It had been lost or something.
It's really hard. It's very hard to impress upon people that didn't come from that era how that And in fact, that whole Pangea doesn't exist anymore, because even the way that you would get in usually, which was you would get in by doing a backup story, right? You would hope that you would get a backup story, like a little 8-page story that would lead to another story that would lead to another story that would lead. That's usually how you got in, or you're an assistant. If you lived out, that's the other thing that was hard for us guys in the Midwest. If you had been living in New York, you probably would have been able to get work, because if you were good enough, somebody would have hired you. Jim Mooney would have hired you, or Vince Coletta would have hired you to erase all the Jack Kirby's backgrounds over the weekend. Right?
Yeah.
Being in Detroit, even if you met, and I kind of knew that Pollard was from Detroit, but it's not like you knew the guy. You could go over to his house, or it just wasn't that. It wasn't that way.
Yeah, there wasn't a critical mass of people. They had all, the people who were 5 years old or 10 years older had already left town. They were living in Connecticut or living in New Jersey or closer to Marvel, DC, and that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
Or they were coming back, and then but they had dropped out of comics, like Arvell and Arvell especially, I think, went into advertising and wasn't really in the comic book business in a day-to-day sense. But yeah, it was a very peculiar time, and you'd mentioned there were alternative news weeklies like the Detroit Metro Times. There were these strange publications on the street, like the Fifth Estate. It was Reagan, the Reagan era.
Yes.
And the Cold War was heating back up, and and I would walk around. I lived along the Woodward Avenue corridor. I would walk up to the GM building, which was ground zero in case of a Russian attack. So that was the kind of temperament of that period. And just a few years later, I broke in, and now I'm a multimillionaire. But it was desperate back then.
And Detroit was weird then too, because when I was the art director for the Metro Times, you go downtown Detroit in the middle of the day, and it was literally like Vincent Price, the last man on earth. There was nobody downtown. There was like no rush hour. It was really a very strange city by that point, because it had so depopulated by the early 80s, and it was a very strange time, and I don't think people were quite as good at networking. It was harder to network, because you might, like you said, you might meet somebody, but there were far fewer conventions, so there were fewer opportunities. In fact, you would go to a convention, and you might meet somebody who was not anyone you even liked. You didn't even like their artwork, but you wanted to try to make some kind of contact with the home planet, hoping that something would pop out of that. And so it was a very different time. So when you started doing Megaton Man, you first did it through Kitchen Sink, right?
Right. Well, I just wanted to say I've met a lot of people come up to me. I want to break into comics. You're not my favorite artist by any means, but at least I think that was Ed Pisker, actually. That Ed Pisker is like, dude, I'm really not into your stuff, but like you've got a foothold, so I'm glad to meet you. That kind of thing. Anyway, you were saying Kitchen Sink Press. So but what I did, I went to the Wayne State University photocopy shop, which was in the basement of a building that's been torn down and replaced by a Barnes and Noble, which only sells hoodies for Wayne State. They don't even sell textbooks, really. I don't think they even use textbooks anymore. But so I would make photocopies of Megaton Man, #1. It took me 13 months to draw it, 83 into early 1984. I had tried a few comic strips, I was trying to find the right format. I was thinking maybe some, because as you know, alternative news weeklies had, Jules Pfeiffer in the Village Voice and Mark Allen Stamati and um, different comic strips like that. I thought maybe Megaton Man was offbeat enough. It would be more political and cultural. So I tried a couple comic strips that went nowhere, and then I got rolling on this comic book, and it took me 13 months to do. And you can see the different phases. If you look at that first issue, there's some style changes and stuff. The lettering gets a lot better after a while. And then I would photocopy it and I sent it off to 15 different publishers, most of whom are gone. I got a lot of nice rejection letters, and the rejection letters would be really crushing. Like, I didn't make it. Like I took it really to heart, but now I look back and I think, holy crap, I got Jim Shooter's autograph in 1981. That's
Jim Shooter
kind
wrote
of
me
impressive.
personally to reject me.
And he actually typed it himself and whited it out, and he like to get an actual. I had no idea that it would be like I wouldn't know how to break in now. I don't know if you start a
get
website.
those questions. You get those questions now. People will ask you those questions, and one of the things, as I always say, is the way that I broke in. You don't break in, right? You have to figure out now how you break in, because the way we broke in doesn't even exist.
Not sure I would even bother now, but that's.
Well, I
I'm
saw
now-
this today.
But I got to ask. You said you taught yourself how to ink, and you said you were in high school when you decided I'm going to ink myself. How did you just begin at that?
Well, there were how-to books. I fell in love with comics the summer of '72. Be 10 years old, and I bought every Marvel comic with a September cover date. And my mom started taking me to the Carl Sandburg Public Library there on 7 Mile Road in Livonia. And they had first time I ever saw a photocopier. So I took like a Spider-Man 112 and made a black and white photocopy of the cover. Like Spider-Man's he's going, Spidey cops out. It's his cover. Riots are going on in the street. And I got like a gray copy of that. And it's like, oh, that is so cool. You can turn full color into a gray. And it was fax machine paper, that kind of thing, thermal paper, But they also had a section of how to cartoon, Dave Breger and backstage at the strips, and it was all comic strips or magazine kind of cartooning.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the later '70s that you started to see like how to draw comics the Marvel way, which would be comic books, and you would have histories of comics, undergrounds. The various things started coming out, but back in the early '70s, it was still very, very much that newspaper strips that was the prime time, and or magazine, or single panel cartoons, that kind of thing. So but they were still nonetheless, that was the tools. So I bought mom took me to Fingers Art Supply, and we got a Speedball #5 set with the B6 and the B5 and the B5.5 and a Hunt 102 and some pen holders and a bottle of ink, and go up to Farmington, Grand River and Farmington Road. They had an art supply store called the Art Alcove, and you could reach into little trays and get little pen points and stuff like that. Kirby hands.
I love it.
Romita hands. And Bristol board, and I got Walter, is it Walter Moses anatomy book, published by Borden. And then How to Draw Comics to Marvel came out in '78. So I mostly learned from trial and error, but I was reading books and Walter T. Foster books, and
Right.
I think in fact, I saw this, I was watching the video this morning. There's a Mike, behind your air conditioner, there's a book. Is that the animation book
Yes, the Preston
on
Blair
your
book.
shelf?
The
The
Foster,
Preston
yeah.
Blair book, yeah.
Preston Blair book. Yeah, I had those in the giant treasury
I still have
formats.
those. Yeah, I have those, and the Walter Rasmussen book or whatever. There was another like cartooning book. But you're right. When back in the day, all the books on cartooning were about newspaper stuff. There was nothing about like how to ink like Wally Wood or Joe Sinnott or Dick Giordano or anything like that. What helped me was when Marvel started putting out those Treasury editions. They were fairly close to original size, and then you could see the lines better, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was
I think
and even the Marvel book, which had inking, really didn't do a good job on it because they were like, here's a page or here's the panel inked by Sinnott, but they're not showing you the pencil and then what Joe would do or like what Tom Palmer would do. They would go like, this one is over inked, and they're like, okay, but what does that mean, right?
Yeah, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way has been surpassed in so many different ways by now. But at that time it was like this was like solid. This was like the Word of God, and to get any kind of instruction and just his list of books in the back. I mean, he had Bern Hogarth's Dynamic Anatomy and Jack Ham and stuff like that. So I mean, those were all pointers to different things. Just as the P.R. Garriock's Masters of Comic Book Artwork, that was like Crum and Eisner, and I had heard of them, and then there was Mobius and Wally Wood and Kurtzman and all these Moscoso. So yeah, and I look back at that now. I bought a copy of Garriock a couple of years ago off the internet, and the reproduction is really terrible, and he just cut things out of like Warren magazine, and that was the Spirit story and stuff. But we were so starved for any kind of information, and I broke a lot of pen points, and I tried to ink with a Speedball B6. Like, oh, this is Indian ink. And it's like Mr. Fantastic doesn't quite look as like I imagined inked by a B6. And then I discovered brushes, but I didn't get into brushes until I was living downtown Detroit, and I would go to Favorable, and I would get a lot of Series 7s and Strathmore Kalinskis and stuff like that, and Zippatone, all that old stuff. It's like carbon paper now, but anyway. Yeah, you just didn't know how it was done. And even Keith, when I visited Keith, I would just see the finished results. Here's a Xerox of the pencils. Here's the ink version. And really, after I broke into the business and I was going to conventions, I would pick up pages. The early '80s, when I had a few bucks to spend. The Ditkos and the Kirby's were already out of price range for me, but then they started releasing like the John Romita senior pages, and I picked up some of those for under $100, like giant Spider-Man shocker pages and stuff. And having those, I would frame them and have them on the walls, and just look up from my drawing board and stuff. And it was a real education to see how like. I even had a Neil Adams page inked by Giordano, and it's like to see that in the flesh and see how loose it was and how rather, you know, they didn't clean up every little extra line that went over, you know, and stuff.
Yeah, you learn about reproduction, like what the reproduction does. You know, like you look at Romita's stuff on Spider-Man, and it was like he was slapping that brush down there with those big trunks, but then you reduce it, you know, or
Sure.
like Frank Giacoya inking stuff, you know,
Yeah.
you learn a lot. I have some Submariner pages that he's inking over Buscema, and then I have some Buscema pages that are inked by Sinnott. And you start to see like the character of each person's line, the calligraphy of their line, their interpretation and understanding of form. You know, you've got the Kniff school or the Raymond school or the people that are somewhere in between those schools. Yeah, you know. The other company I remember I sent samples to was the people that did Captain Canuck.
Oh, okay.
Back in the day, and I got probably the best critique I ever got. It's actually on my blog. I got George Freeman wrote back and went over my stuff and did every page, and did a really great drawing critique of my work, and I learned a lot from that. And I was probably around 15 or 16. So little things like that you could kind of live off of for a long time because you didn't get a lot of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would, yeah, I was looking at the reproduced comic books, and that was kind of my benchmark, was like, look at how detailed that is. And I was trying to reproduce that level of detail. And it was like 3 or 4 issues into Megaton Man, I was realizing that, like, there's not the human eye, for one thing, but even cameras in those days, and you're going through film positives and film negatives and plates and stuff. We could not hold that level of detail. So I really stripped back after, you know, by the late 80s. I was going back to more like my Romita, what I imagined Romita roots were, and was looking at a lot of comic strip stuff, and a lot of just like, as I went along, I if you've ever seen like James Montgomery Flagg originals or Gibson Girl, you know, those guys drew like, you know, like a dining room table, and it could be reduced to like 5 inches. And of course, it's going to look like their corrections would be just scraped into, you know, the board and stuff. So seeing originals was an education. But you're kind of touching on a topic, which is like conventions themselves had a different function in those days. You know, that was especially coming from Detroit. I never got into the Marvel offices or the DC offices, you know, for a visit.
We have a question from Joseph on YouTube. Now, were you ever tempted to go for inking from Marvel or DC?
Yeah, I tried, and this was after my kitchen sink 80s. I tried getting freelance. I had kind of my foot in the door with Mike Gold at Wasteland at DC in the late 80s. I did a couple little jobs. I could never somehow latch onto mainstream superhero work. I was too heretical somehow. Reading all those comics journals and doing Megaton Man and stuff, I was perceived as like this guy's going to be trouble. So, but it's funny because that I do that kind of style now for commissions, and I couldn't get arrested in the 90s at Marvel or DC, but I do a straight superhero style. People seem to like it.
That's another thing too. I think that people unless you come from our era, you don't really realize that there definitely were like camps or demarcations. There were like the underground, like there was the old underground, like the Zap stuff, right? And then there was
Right.
like the alternative or indie stuff, and then there was the mainstream stuff. And it's funny because you could sort of feel the vibe from people, like you're one of those. You know, the underground guys would say you're mainstream, and the mainstream guys could say you're underground, right? It's like
Yeah, you know, and like whatever company you threw in with, you know, I mean, there was, you know, I was at Kitchen Sink Press, and who's my posse at Kitchen Sink Press? Will Eisner and Milton Caniff and Harvey Kurtzman, and I'm the punk kid, and you know, and I love the Fantagraphic stuff. I love the Hernandez brothers and Dan Clowes and Jim Woodring, but I would hang out with those guys. It wasn't until like Beto Hernandez had no use for me whatsoever until I did Wendy Whitebread. And then I was like, I was a colleague. So I mean, there were just these demarcations, you know, and the Marvel people were the most aloof. You know, Carol Kalish and Jim Shooter and the Peter David. The Marvel people seem to be like we're the seniors in high school with the cool cars and clothes and stuff, and everybody else was just like, you know, you're just out in the bush, you know, bush league somewhere, you know. And there was also, I understand there was a prejudice, like, you know, Tom DeFalco didn't want to hire anybody that had been a independent person because they had picked up bad habits. Somebody told me that. I don't know if that's true or not, but
it's even the fact
they
you would say that.
they preferred their own homegrown talent. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Oh, I was going to say, even the fact that you would say that, there were a lot of things like that back in the day, right? So someone would hear someone say something that someone else said. Now, who knows whether that was true, but that's sort of like how things were done. Like I remember meeting some underground guys. To me, there's either good cartooning or bad cartooning, and I've always felt that way. Like, you know, I think, and maybe that came from my liking stuff like Mad Magazine, which had like really wide styles of cartooning. So I always liked different kinds of cartooning, but I definitely felt that when you started out, if you were mainstream, the underground guys kind of looked at you like, well, you're not really, you know,
What's
you're
it
a
like
more.
now? I have a question for Jamar, because like now who's your imprint? Who do you do your series for?
I'm at Scholastic Graphics.
I mean, well, you know, so he's like that's like a real book publisher.
sorry, Doug.
If anybody's got bragging rights, it's like the people like, you know, Putnam or Doubleday or whoever, or like First Second, or like, you know, we do real books, and we have graphic novel like that would be the king of the hill now, I would think. Like, oh, you do work for hire superheroes, you know. But so I think I don't know what my point was, but I think we're like all underground now, compared to some. There's always some, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side of the street, you know. But there was always something, and you guys are all hooked into the National Cartoonist Society.
Yeah.
I can remember when those guys, they did not want comic book people at all.
Oh yeah,
like, oh, you're like, you know, real cartoonists are syndicated or editorial cartoon. I don't know who all, but like, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. It's definitely changed over the last, I would say, 10, 15 years.
oh yeah.
And one of the things about the NCS is that every cartoonist has had some sort of story or interaction with somebody from the NCS and that core memory is burned into them. So say if I don't know, Mel Lazarus told you to get bent in like 1983, you're never going to let that go. You know what I'm saying. So that's one of the big things I deal with being on the board. It's like there's something new going on.
Yeah, I remember Williamson did not have anything really fond to say of the NCS, because when he was doing the strips, the Adventures you were like the bastard stepchild of the newspaper, because they didn't even have a category. They don't. I mean, I'm a member of the NCS, but they don't really have a category for the type of strip that I do. They have best humor, they have a lot of different stuff, but they don't really have and not that there's that many left, but you don't really have things for this category of the Phantom or a soap opera strip. So yeah, there was always a pecking order, because the guys in comics wanted to do strips, right? And Alex Raymond wanted to be Norman Rockwell, right? It was always like, whatever you were, you wanted to be the guy one rung up from where you were. But for almost all of the history of comics, comic books was like, if you got a comic strip, and in fact, usually when the average person I say I do comics, if they're my age or older, they want to know what newspaper is your strip in, right?
Right. That's what I got all the time. Yeah.
Oh, what strip do you do? What newspaper? They don't think of you doing comic books. It's different now because of all the Marvel movies.
No, I had explained to people but the comic book is, you can be artistic. You can do camera angles. You can be an auteur. You can do all this stuff. I don't want to just do wallpaper. But I'm kind of amazed, because I see Tom Badiak at a show every year over in Ohio, about an hour and a half away. And I always ask, he's got Kent State is reissuing all of his Funky Winker Beans. I discovered Funky Winker Bean when that same summer of I'm buying Marvel comics, but then I realized the Detroit News has 2 pages of comics every day, so I would read those, even if they weren't as provocative, or the girls weren't as shapely, that kind of thing, or it was family friendly stuff. But I was interested in all that stuff. I was interested in Mad Magazine and New Yorker as it came along, and or as I became aware of it, and so forth. Undergrounds, Playboy, just the cartoons, that kind of thing. But
for the articles, right?
But yeah, so and I know several people that are asked me to join NCS, and it's like, oh, you want me to be your friend now? That's what Mel Lazarus said to me.
See, it's just it's in there. Hit the brakes, kid.
Forget that, huh? No, it's a changing world.
It really is, and I don't push too much, because I don't want to break anything. But it's I would just say give it another shot. That's
okay.
What I would say.
I'll take it under consideration.
All right. So Don, we have been just flowing tonight, and it's time for my favorite part of the show. You may know it as the lightning round. We have been stacking up questions like cordwood, and and Stone Cold Steve Conley is going to fire off questions for you to answer briefly, and then we'll continue.
All right, we're going to start off with Tim Fielder. It's going to cover the screen here. Trust us, Don is still here. Tim Fielder on Facebook asks, or actually says, "Hey Don, I just want to state publicly that Border Worlds is one of the great mature science fiction tales of all time. Epic scale, beautiful art, realistic characters and interaction, beautifully sensual bodies, hard science fiction. This project is a huge influence on my work. One day I hope to be able get a hardcover collection signed by you. Kudos to you, sir. And
Well, I'm not going to argue.
and Tim follows up with, could you tell us about your experience with Border Worlds?
Tim has brought up a note of rancor, but I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to argue. No, well, it speaks to a couple things. The first thing I'm thinking is anything. That was the other issue for years, was that anything other than superheroes was a real tough sell. Even a humorous superhero was a tough sell. But then I jumped to. I remember Megaton Man was the hottest thing Kitchen Sink had ever published. It was a full color. First 2 issues sold out like right away. I don't think Kitchen wanted to be in color. He was kind of forced into it because I have this theory, but also because Pete Poplaski told me this. But Eclipse had published John Law Detective, which was an Eisner. It was the original version of Bring In Sans Serif. They published it in color and they sold 75,000 copies. And so then naturally, Eisner didn't have to stamp his feet or anything. The Spirit had to be in color too. But then they needed more things to publish in color to break, to get better deals with the printer. And my Xeroxes from Detroit came in over the transom, and Megaton Man seemed like a good idea. They had done things like Harold Head.
Yeah.
Harold Hitler's Cocaine. Remember that?
Yep.
There, when I lived in Wisconsin, I could have filled any number of trucks with boxes of Harold Head #2, Hitler's Cocaine, because apparently the direct sales market did not want a full color underground comic about a bisexual Canadian hippie who's searching for their Führer's blow down in South America. So that was the kind of thing Kitchen was doing. They were trying different things. And Megaton Man clicked and sold, but whereas Harold Head he had overprinted like 5,000 copies per issue that were sitting in a warehouse in Wisconsin in a converted barn. Megaton Man, he printed really close to the bone. And so we sold out. I think we got print orders for 18,000, and he printed maybe 19 and a half, and they all sold out in 2 weeks. The second issue, same thing. So the summer of '85, fans are coming up to me going, can I read the first, can you reprint the first 2 issues so I can read the whole thing from the beginning? I love Megaton Man, but I bought #3 and 4 and 5. Can you reprint the first 2 issues? And I remember this conversation I had with Dennis, because I was living in Wisconsin at the time, summer of '85. And I said, people want these books. Let's do a new cover. Oh no, can't do it. Can't do it. It's in color. Can't reprint it because I'll lose money. The orders won't be as good as the first printing. And I tried everything. I tried every suggestion. He just wouldn't do it. And I figured, well, this is going to go nowhere. So let me just wrap up Megaton Man. I'll try something else. And I already started the Border Worlds backup feature, and making fun of superheroes is kind of it's a pretty shallow mine shaft. I mean, you run out of stuff because after you've made fun of the mad scientists and the team bickering and that kind of stuff, there's not much else to say. So I thought, well, I'm gonna try something else, and so the color line came to an end, and we tried Border Worlds, and I think it was such a completely different. It was such a departure, going from a full color superhero parody of a male character with muscles and capes to a brooding science fiction story about a space station and a woman in a spacesuit and smugglers and soldiers and this far outpost and political intrigue. It was just aside from the fact that I didn't know what I was doing in terms of story structure, I had I had a long range story in mind, but it was really I bit off a lot more than I could chew. So it was just such a tough sell. And then you had the black and white bust, the black and white boom and bust. Steve remembers. What was that like, Steve?
I caught
You
the
remember
second.
the hamsters and the turtles and the whole thing?
I caught the second wave of that. I caught the just post spirits one. There was the Turtles one, and then there was the '90s one, right?
Well, the 90s was like when everybody signed up exclusive with distributors.
Right. Yeah.
That was the other implosion. So there were those were the two bookends in the 20th century. But the black and white, we had mentioned there was a fellow in Detroit named Stu Shapiro who reinvented himself and became Todd Loren and started Revolutionary Comics in San Diego, and they would do all these rock and roll bio comics. But all these black and white comics were like selling, Saul Brodsky's, Salson publications and the hamsters and my theory has always been that the Rolling Stone article on Frank Miller's Batman got everybody so excited. And even though it was an inside job, it was Warner Communications talking about their own, DC Comics subsidiary. But Frank Miller, Batman, they're reinventing Batman. This is the biggest thing in the world. And well, who's been inspired by Frank Miller? Well, the Turtles were completely inspired by Ronin and so forth. So so the Turtles are huge, and like somehow in the euphoria of this moment, people thought, Troll Lords was selling 80,000 copies, and great guys, and I knew those guys in Chicago, and the hamsters, and then this, that, and the other. There were all these black and white titles, so it seemed like a good time to do a science fiction mature readers black and white series, namely Border Worlds. But then it went off a cliff. And by the summer of '87, I'm making like $30 a page because I'm tied to royalties. And Mike Gold, thank God, Mike Gold is looking for people to draw Wasteland. And so, I mean, if it hadn't been for that, I'd have been out on the street,
So you didn't have a page rate with Kitchen. You had a royalty based upon what you made after he made his money back.
Well, I got for color, I got 8.5% of the cover price. It was $1.95 book. But I was also paying for the coloring. And the way it worked out in raw terms, my colorist made $50 a page, which was the highest rate in the industry, because they were painting in cell vinyl and so forth. And they were the spirit colorists by then. It's kind of like the Earth, Wind, and Fire horn section or something. So they were getting $50 a page. I only made I've calculated this several times, and I've got the pay stubs to prove it. I made between $41 and $49 a page for everything else. And I would say, Dennis, reprint these fucking first two issues so I can make a little more money out of it. He's like, well, Don, you own it, So, well, you're not reprinting anything. So what good is owning the copyright? That's a whole thing because, I'd gone from Keith Pollard shattering my dreams of being a Marvel penciler innocently enough, just by showing me the process. Right, here's Tony DeZuniga inking me, and here's Dave Hunt messing me up. That's actually not true. Dave Hunt's actually a pretty good inker, but I think it was mostly Jim Mooney. I think was really they were just hacking that stuff out. But so I go from that horror story to like, okay, now I'm an independent cartoonist and I own my own copyrights and I'm writing my own stuff, but I can't. The guys at Death Rattle were making more money than I was. But yeah, so like DC, I would get these scripts and I'd get 240 a page, 260 a page for penciling, inking, lettering, and I would compare that to 35, 45. I think the first issue of Border Worlds I might have made over $100, but it just dropped like a rock. And by the summer of '87, I just couldn't. The orders were, Kitchen at the time said, well, we've seen signs that the orders are turning around. And it's like, what do you mean? They're either turning around or they're not. And it was going straight down. The bar graph was going straight down. And I thought, well, rather than mess this up, I'm just going to set Border Worlds, set Border Worlds aside, and I'll do Wasteland. And we were already planning to do a kind of a little mini series or a new stretch of Megaton Man because I had some more ideas for that. But yeah, that was the first real crisis.
Well, that segues perfectly into Jeff's question on the YouTube. How was it working on Wasteland? Was Del Close a comics fan?
I knew John Ostrander at the time. Me and Bill Loebs, I distinctly remember visiting John's house. John was writing Grimjack, and he had a backup feature called Munden's Bar. And so I drew one of those, and then Mike Gold went to DC, and he took John with him, and he wanted to develop the project. And John, being a theater person, I just came across some early correspondence from Mike Gold, and I posted that on my blog. But he explained how we're going to have 4 different artists. 3 of them will draw 9-page stories every month, and then the 4th one will do the cover. And it's going to be this creepy, weird comic book. And I was like, for me, it was just a job. It was like, I get to keep my drawing board out of the rain, and you could have faxed me Archie, Jughead. You could have, whatever scripts you wanted, I would have given it a try. But and there wasn't the internet, and I had heard of Del Close. I had heard How to Speak Hip, which was a comedy album he did in the early '60s. I heard that on public radio one time. And I knew he had been associated with SNL, Saturday Night Live, and the Blues Brothers and Belushi and so forth. But there wasn't the kind of thing where you could Google and watch a clip from Ferris Bueller or something like that. And he's only, Del Close did not leave a vast body of work anyway. Like, if you've seen his documentary, they mostly used my drawings to illustrate what was going on, because there was like no footage. There's some really bad videos of some rehearsals at Second City, and some, a couple clips from movies. But there wasn't like you could just push a button and find out what it looked like. And I didn't meet Del until the mid '90s. And I was on Kim Howard Johnson's radio show in the Moondogs. Gary Colabano had a chain of stores called Moondogs. He sponsored this radio show. And so I was in Chicago December of '94, and Saturday morning, he took me into this radio show, and Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti were the guests, and Del Close. I got to meet Del and Tiny Tim.
Wow.
We had the Moondogs Pop Culture Radio Hour. You can find a link to it. They've been digitized. You can listen to the whole thing. And I was publishing Bizarre Heroes, and I gave everybody paper hats and the whole thing. And but that was long after Wasteland. That was 5 or 6 years, 7 years after Wasteland. So, and the thing about it, and I look back at this now, and it's really remarkable. I'm sure, Mike, I'm sure you all have freelance stories where you just did something for work, and for the paycheck, and you're not necessarily into it. You're not a fan of it. You don't know. You don't get it. And I certainly, these Wasteland stories were like, I'm not sure I'm in tune with what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing. But it never occurred to me to pick up the phone and call and say, John, can you give me some direction? What's my motivation here?
Mm-hmm.
I could have done that, but I thought I had only drawn my own. I'd only illustrated my own ideas. And I didn't have to have an editorial meeting with myself to just sit and draw. I mean, I was listening to your Eric Larson interview, and it's like he's just penciling and inking and working different sizes, and he'll scribble on the back, and he's write some dialogue, on the back of an envelope, and that was the way I was working on Megaton Man. And then somebody faxes me these scripts or dot matrix printouts of scripts would come in FedEx with a bunch of DC Bristol board, and I thought it was my job to figure out what this was all about, and I thought I was too stupid to ask questions. Long story short, I could have done all those a lot better now. And I see Mike Gold at conventions these days, and I'm continually apologizing and saying, I didn't appreciate the opportunity that I had, and I didn't it's really amazing that you could learn on the job like that.
That's kind of how Thomas was, though. You really did learn on the job. I mean, because there really was no other way to learn to do it other than to do it,
Right.
I mean, it's really, I think that's the only way anyone ever learned. Maybe you started as an assistant or whatever, but we wanted to see if you also had some art you wanted to show us, because you pulled some stuff aside.
Well, I've got books and I got PDFs, and I can show you what I've been working on. Let me see.
Yeah.
Show.
If you have something to hold up, Don, I'll give you the whole screen.
So what are you working on right now? Are you working on another Megaton Man?
I am working on a lot of groovy things, baby. What do you see my screen? Do I have to hit something?
You have to hit present, and then go find it, and then
Share screen. Okay. All right. You see my screen now.
Not yet.
You see Bizarre Heroes?
Not yet.
So after you hit the source, and then I think you have one more button to hit.
Select window or screen. There we go. Try this. So I've been the month of January. I just put together my Lost Art of Don Simpson, which is being printed overseas. This is volume 2 of the complete Megaton Man universe. This is a Fantagraphics publication. Let me go to, there we go. So I got a Jim Pasco introduction. The Jeff Smith drawing is a placeholder for right now, because Jeff Smith has also done the forward. So that's where his drawing goes. Jim Pasco works for, does a series called Cottons for First Second Press. I've known him for many years, Pittsburgh. So I got the name dropping intros. Jeff Smith, Jim Pasco. This is the Kitchen Sink Bizarre Heroes #1. I'll skip ahead to some interesting stuff. A lot of these are, characters from, again, you were talking to Eric Larson in his interview, which I watched this afternoon. He's talking about characters that he had when he was in high school. The meddler here was a character from junior high school. It was actually a Halloween costume that I made. It didn't look as cool as the way I draw it here, but I part of the reason, part of the impetus for Bizarre Heroes was to bring in all of these characters that had been sitting around since the 70s in my imagination. B-50, this robot character, he's usually wearing an astronaut suit. He's one of the characters from when I was in junior high school. But I decided to throw all these characters into a series called Don Simpson's Bizarre Heroes. So I've been putting all this together. This is something like this is page 498.
Holy!
Wow.
It'll be total. This goes to like, I have 550 pages. So I put all this together. This I had scanned quite a while ago. I was cleaning up all the little scan smudges and stuff like that. Can you see? Do you see the Doom Defiers now?
Yes.
So that's the new stuff. All right, Complete Megaton Man. I've also been putting together a couple other like shorter graphic novels. This follows Bizarre Heroes. This is from the late 90s. I did a series, an online strip called the Megaton Man Weekly Serial. And I'd be interested in your feedback, because this was a strip that I did, and I would serialize. I'd basically put half a page up every week, which was too low a dosage to go viral, but I got some work done. These are scanned from the original line work. I also what I'm thinking of doing is publishing a black and white edition, and then I have some of the color. The color I did was kind of low resolution, so I've created a separate PDF that you could order as part of the package, so people can see the original color. Some of these are all files from the 90s, and 300 DPI was the absolute max at that time. You can see some of the RGB color. I was using RGB color so I could get really green eyes and stuff. Get these searing color. So I've been putting these things together. I've been putting together the microbus adventure. This will be 150 pages plus some extra stuff. Look at some of the pencils that have survived some of the process and so forth, some of the rejected covers and things. And last but not least, after that, so complete volume 1 and 2, complete volume 3. This would be volume 4, which is a full color graphic novel that I've been working on for the entire century so far.
Wow.
And this was a continuation of the material from the weekly serial, the online strip. This follows the adventures of my characters, and then 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And so I incorporated that into the plot in 2002. And you'd mentioned Batten Lash at the pit stop. Batten said it was like way too soon to make September 11th a part of a comic book plot. So here, Megaton Man is back in high school because he's been. There was an error on his permanent transcript, so he had to repeat his senior year. And meanwhile, the September 11th attack takes place, so they have to come back to New York, and this is the harrowing sequence where my characters who've been exiled in Michigan, in Ann Arbor of all places, they head back to New York, and they fly in the Q-mobile. But as you recall that day, there was jets flying around Manhattan.
Mm.
So I have fighter jets trying to blow the Megatropolis Quartet out of the sky, and I have the Statue of Liberty. And long story short, I used this to move all my characters back to Megatropolis. So that will be the follow-on, and then I've got new stuff beyond that. So I'm hoping to see at least one of those things published. I've been talking with Fantagraphics about basically the complete Megaton Man Volume 2 will be just like Volume 1, except it'll be this big, huge thing. But it'll be all the Fiasco Comics Bizarre Heroes that I self-published, and they did a beautiful job with this.
That's a big cheeseburger.
These are all kitchen sink Megaton Mans with some letters pages and stuff. And
amazing.
All the one shots.
How did you keep copies of all your stuff? Archive? How do you? Because that's a big question too. It's like maintaining your archive from year to year to year to year, system to system to system to system.
I haven't sold too much of my creator-owned artwork, and I had source material. I either had photocopies, I had the colored gray lines in some cases. Scanning film is not ideal, so I don't really have a scanner that can scan rear projection.
Yeah,
but it was all pretty good. I mean, 85-95% of it was original artwork. There were some cases where I had bought or I had gotten 11x17 photocopies, and in most cases those were pretty sharp in the 80s and 90s, particularly in the 90s. And I have I used to use a lot of Zipatone, which on the original artwork has shrunk.
Oof.
Yeah,
cracked and so forth, and discolored. And that's so I would, in those cases, I would sometimes default to the photocopies, because the photocopies don't have that problem. They're black powder on paper, and they stayed pretty intact. So I've a lot of cleanup. I mean, a lot of schmutzing and cleaning up. My scanner had a little dot somewhere on it, like 50 pages, 150 pages have this little dot. I had to go and find it and so forth. But and some of my stuff, Eric talked about this, about oversized artwork, you have to piece it together and all that stuff. So I scanned most of all this stuff about 2.5 years ago, and the main thing is trying to encourage Fantagraphics to proceed with volume 2. They've got quite a few of projects already and shortage of editors and so forth. So I started laying out the second one this month. It's been about a week.
Don, do you keep anything on the cloud, or do you usually, like boxes that drop or anything like that? Or is it all just like hard physical things in your studio?
No, well, I mean, the Lost Art of Megaton Man, a lot of hard drive stuff. I think I showed you the Billy Tucci, Dave Sim, Cerebus pit stop. And did I show you that at the beginning? The color.
Yeah.
So that's the original file, 300 DPI from 90, 95, 96. So I've just copied over stuff. It's amazing because I've gone from like 2 storage lockers, one storage locker to another, to the garage of my ex-wife's house, to another storage locker, to another storage locker, and some narrow misses with weather and other stuff. But somehow I've kept. God wants me to do this, guys. God wants me to put these comic books out because I have a message for the world. In 2026, I have a message for the world. So yeah, it's just good fortune and hanging on to most of my stuff. Somebody just Jason Moore, who's inked a few pages of mine, he got a piece of artwork and sent me a good scan of it. It was like a promo piece for Journey and Megaton Man. So it's out there. And I had to, in the first volume of Megaton Man, I had to, there were a couple pages that I had to recreate. And luckily I can ink close enough to what I used to do.
But I mean, you've really been managing this from the very beginning, right? I mean, you've been managing archiving your art, and you have to know where it is.
Well, yeah, and in another 5 years, I'm not going to be able to do that because the cognitive thing is already taken hold. I did this page I sold to a collector, this double page spread. So I had to basically blow it out, scan it out of a book, and re-ink it.
Wow.
And I did it close enough, and a couple other pages. There were a couple other things that I had to do, but I can still reasonably approximate the 80s inking style. Kills my wrist, but I can still do it in small doses. And yeah, I'm there's got to be some reason that this has survived, and hopefully these books will go out into the world and have something to say, I guess.
So your current publisher is Fantagraphics.
Well, and we also did you just had Amanda. I saw Amanda's question up on the screen, or comment. We did this thing called Multimensions. This is Cosmic Lion Productions. And these 2 books came out at almost identically the same time. The Complete Megaton Man Volume 1, and then Megaton Man, Megaton Man Multimensions, which is this treasury size collaboration with 50 different cartoonists, colorists. And this is some of Amanda's work.
Oh, it's fantastic.
She did the Golden Age Megaton Man. There's Amanda. And she's working on her own graphic novel called Supertopia. We'll give a plug for that. She's looking for a publisher, by the way. I'm trying to steer her away from the one that she is thinking of, but Don't sign a contract with anybody until you speak to a lawyer.
So would you rather have a publisher or would you rather do Kickstarter?
Well, I just did my first Kickstarter for the Lost Art of Don Simpson, which is going to be 200 pages of a lot of commercial art, a lot of things that I own and things that I mostly own. Don't tell anybody. Jobs that I did for here and there, and I've gathered together. I was going to do something completely different for my follow-up project, but I got desperate. And again, I had all this stuff on hard drives, so I just pulled it together, and I had some stuff I had to go back and scan. We're talking things from the especially late 90s, early 2000s. We're talking 300 DPI or less. Now my standard is like 1200.
Yeah.
I like to scan a little high resolution. So I had some of the original. Hey, let me go grab some artwork for you. Show you this.
So while Don is up from his seat, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're here every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. EST. And the hits keep coming. All right, let's see what Don's got. And then we're going to start wrapping it up for the night, Don.
Oh, no, we're here till 4 a.m.
It's going to be you. So I'm leaving.
Don's just dug into the archives. So these are comic strips I did for like a web startup thing. This was my ex-wife's idea. Wow. School beans. I found a bunch of stuff since I sent the book off to China. I keep finding more stuff. But comic strips. Remember those, Mike? Comic strips, newspapers. How's that business? I'm actually interested to know what's going on. Every time I get together with Tom Badiak, I ask him how's business. He kind of shakes his head.
The thing is you don't know. You don't the numbers. If you own the strip, you created the strip, you know. If you're like me, you're the hired gun who comes in. You have no idea.
This is an example. These are 11 by 17 photocopies, wow. And I have
wow.
And I just made these. Probably I made these because I was going to a convention. I wanted to show people what I was working on, but now they're source material. So I've been scanning stuff like that, and this is
oh, it's fantastic.
This is what I'm working on now. Wow. This is the new stuff. So they're back in New York. This will be the new cover for the 9/11 kind of storyline, where they come back to New York. Yeah. Any other questions?
The other thing I was going to mention is that you also went and got your PhD. So you were teaching, right?
It was a different lifetime. Well, I after the the last, there was the black and white boom and bust, and then there was the exclusive distribution deal. I'm in the dark now. After I continued to cartoon, but I was only doing half a page a week online. So I did the Megaton Man Weekly serial, but I was and I did a lot of commercial art in the late 90s. People wanted superhero mascots. I blogged about this. Everybody was talking about wireless Bluetooth technology. Well, there's your dog, Jamar. And so they didn't know how to visualize like Bluetooth technology. Like you'll be wireless. You'll be able to move around your office. You'll be able to take your computer outside of your cubicle and you can move around. And what's that like? So they thought, well, it's like being a superhero. It's like, it's like science fiction. So I must have done, I swear to God, I must have done half a dozen pitches for different things. Internet service providers, wireless communications of some sort or another. Between 1998 and the early 2000s, I did half a dozen wireless man. They could have been like the identical pitch. Like it would be, some guy flying around with a wrist thing and fighting some cyborg tech monster that was baffling your ability to communicate with the home office or whatever it was. And so some of these got printed. Advertising paid a lot better than comics, I can tell you that. Even pitches that went nowhere, I would still get a pretty good paycheck. But I did a lot of stuff like that, and that petered out. And I was doing part-time. I was working at Borders part-time, and one day I realized I'm scanning. You have to picture this: the early 2000s. Every other book you sold, if you were a clerk at Borders, every other book you sold was a Harry Potter book, but in between was like Idiot's Guides for Dummies and Sham's Algebra 2 and things like that. And a light bulb just went off over my head. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I could go back to college and I could get one of these Idiot's Guides for Sham's Algebra 2 and I could like work on it over the summer. And then when I took the class, I could get an A, and like I could read this used book on Greek philosophy, and then I could take a class in it. And I enrolled. Long story short, I enrolled. Well, September 11th happened, and that was shocking enough. And I was in therapy, and I was concerned about civilization. And then I'm working at Borders, and I'm selling Harry Potter, and the Beatles Treasury, that giant coffee table book they had. And I thought, I'll go back to school and I can get it, I can pile up credits at the community college and so forth. So long story short, between 2003 and 2013, I went back to school and I got a PhD in art history, which is kind of like knowing how to ink with a speedball, a B6 or something. But I taught as an adjunct for 10 years or so. And it helped me. It was art history, so it helped me appreciate archival research. I didn't think I would turn it on myself, but it's like, oh, look, this is a rare document. This is an artifact, I can. And so I've taken that approach.
Yeah.
And back in the old days, they used to use lead plates, and proof sheets, and have you ever seen those? Like if you were in syndicated cartooning, if you were a newspaper, you would get a paper mold and a proof. And the paper mold, you would pour hot lead into it, and that would make your printing plate. Have you ever seen any of these things? It's really fascinating. But anyway, that it's now a completely defunct technology, like Zipatone and everything else. But yeah, I just did it for 10 years, and it's just one foot in front of the other. At least there was a clear path. There was a yellow brick road. It's like you get this many credits, and you get to this stage, and you get an advisor, and then you write a dissertation. It was all very fascinating to me. I certainly read a lot and wrote a lot and did a lot of thinking and like almost no drawing. There were years 2009, 2012. I got my PhD in 2013, but I there were some years that like I would do like 2 pages in the summer.
And that's it.
Wow.
That was my entire output was 2 pages for the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund or something like that. So, but it I'm glad you're impressed. It's not a big deal, but
Well, Don, I think that we're going to stop here. We're going to put our pencils down, and I am going to ask you if you'd like to come back for part 2.
oh sure. Well, we haven't
Yeah.
even gotten into foreshortening.
We're going to do Kirby Hands in a second, but yeah, we ran out of runway tonight. So let's,
Well,
if
that's
you,
great. Yeah.
yeah, let's, if you can, have you back like super soon, like maybe next week. Well, you tell us what you can do.
Sure. Well, I've got I've got irons in the fire, and there's more things in the pipeline, and all those metaphors. So
Yeah, we've hardly
Sure
scratched the
thing, yeah.
surface. Oh, that sounds awesome. All right,
well, it
guys.
was great talking to all you guys, Steve,
Yeah, you
Mar,
too.
Mike.
It was great meeting Jens. Now that you're Pittsburgh.
Thank you for remembering.
And with our Philly Pittsburgh thing, I see we got along swimmingly tonight. So I'm glad we could mend our
You
things.
can have your sub. We can have our hoagie.
Hanky,
What's your dog's name? Jamar?
Cosmo.
Cosmo.
Yeah. He's like scratching at the door. So thank you, Jeff. Well,
All right. Well, I hope I haven't derailed your podcast. You guys were going great guns there.
No,
It's all about the guests,
yeah, it's
You
fantastic.
can't get it. If you can't get a decent guest, you're screwed.
True. But
It's
yeah,
too
I
bad.
think if we can like quickly do a part 2, I think that'll be really great
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we've hardly scratched the surface. We'd love to maybe even have you back next week. So let's start to wrap up, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. We have only just begun with Dr. Don Simpson, so I'm very excited to have him back. I will be here tomorrow night at 9 p.m. for Coffee Break with JN. Don, I think you'd like Coffee Break. We'll have to have you hang out and watch that.
There's more where this came from. So, all right.
More. All right, hold on. Let's do those Kirby hands, Don. You wanted to do it. Let's get them out. Put them out. There you go. Nice. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
These are Romita hands.
Oh, I
This
like
is
that.
this is a Gil Kane fist
Oh, nice.
right there,
Nice.
and then everything else is a Kirby. All right, guys. Thanks.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you in a little bit. Take care.